My sister raised her glass in my direction at my parents' 35th anniversary dinner, smiled the way she always smiles when she wants something from a room, and said, "I just want everyone here to know how much we love her." 47 people turned to look at me. I felt my face go warm. And then she said, "So we're all hoping she'll finally do the right thing and share the lake house with family." My father was already nodding. My mother was already looking at her hands. And I understood, in that exact second, that this entire party had been built around this one moment. That the handwritten invitation, the venue, the candles, and the centerpieces, all of it had been scaffolding for a public ask that was always going to be very hard to refuse. I smiled back at my sister. I sat down, and later, when my father's hand closed around my arm in front of those 47 people, and he called me selfish and ungrateful, and my sister began to clap. Deliberately, like she was marking something as finished. I pressed my lips together, walked to the parking lot, and made one quiet call from the front seat of my car. Just one. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The invitation came on a Thursday, my mother's handwriting on the envelope. She hadn't handwritten anything in years. I noticed the effort and felt briefly moved by it. Inside was a printed card, 35th anniversary celebration, Greystone Hall in Gresham, cocktails at 6, dinner at 7, RSVP by the 12th, and a photograph my sister had clearly chosen. My parents on a trip I wasn't part of, both laughing at something outside the frame. There was no personal note, just the facts of the event and a phone number I already had. I should have read all of that more carefully. I called my mother to confirm. She said, "It'll be so nice to have everyone together." I asked if I should bring anything. She said, "Just yourself." I've since learned that's what people say when they've already arranged everything around your presence and don't need your contribution. They just need you there. I drove up from Salem on a Saturday evening in late April. The Columbia River Gorge still holds onto cold that time of year. The water below the highway was gray-green and fast, and the hills had that particular early spring look of something not quite decided. I left my cat with my neighbor, Full Bowl, her favorite blanket on the radiator. I drove alone. That turned out to be exactly right. The Greystone Hall lot was half full when I arrived. Through the tall windows, I could see white tablecloths, a bar cart, people moving between conversations. My sister's husband's truck was parked up front. I stood for a second in the cold before going in. At the door, a young woman with a clipboard scanned her list when I gave my name. She scanned it again. "I have you listed as a general guest," she said, and offered me a badge with a number on it rather than a name. I took it without comment, put it in my coat pocket, and walked through. The room was done up nicely. Candles, greenery, a photograph display along one full wall. I stopped at that wall. There were pictures of my parents through the years, their wedding, early years in their first apartment, Christmas mornings, family vacations, my sister's wedding, her 3 children as babies. I went through every frame. I found myself in 2 of them, both from my childhood. In one, I was half-cropped. I stood there for a moment, let the feeling pass through me without naming it. Then I went to find my seat. My place card was at a table near the back, close to the kitchen's swing doors. My sister and her husband were at the center table with my parents. My aunts and uncles had the window tables. The couple next to me were friends of my father's from his golf league. Kind, curious. Not quite sure who I was until I told them. We talked about the drive from Salem, about the weather, about their grandchildren's soccer tournament. They were pleasant people. They had no particular stake in the evening. Dinner was good. The salmon was overcooked, but I ate it. My wine glass was refilled once. I watched my sister work the room between courses. Touching elbows, tilting into conversations, laughing in the specific calibrated way she has that makes people feel chosen. She is genuinely gifted at rooms. I used to admire it without reservations. I've spent the last few years understanding it differently. My father made the first toast before the main course. He talked about 35 years, about what it meant to build something that lasts, about how children were the real measure of a life well made. He looked at my mother when he said the sweet gifts, and at my sister when he said the parts about legacy. He didn't look at me once. I drank my water. After dessert, my sister stood and tapped her glass. The room went quiet in that warm, expectant way. Everyone still half smiling, waiting for something brief and touching, the kind of toast that ends an evening cleanly. She thanked the venue. She thanked the guests. She talked about what family meant to her husband, to her kids. And then she turned toward me, and her voice softened into something that sounded exactly like sincerity. "There's someone here tonight I've been wanting to speak to in front of everyone," she said. "Because I believe in public declarations. I believe when we love someone, we say it out loud, in front of the people who matter." Heads turned. Someone at a far table made a small sound of anticipation. "My sister has worked so hard her whole life," she continued. "She bought this beautiful lake house on the river all by herself, without help from anyone. She let that word, anyone, sit for a full beat. And our family has been hoping for years that she'd share it with us. Let the kids have a place to make memories. Let our parents have somewhere to go in the summers." Another pause. So I thought, in front of everyone who loves her, I'd ask her again. Because I think when you hear how much it would mean to all of us, you understand that family is about more than just owning things. The silence that followed was different from any silence before it. I looked at my sister across the room. She was still smiling, chin slightly raised, her husband's arms crossed in the settled way of someone who has already decided how this ends. My parents' table was very still. My father's expression had gone flat and certain. My mother was looking somewhere past my shoulder, hands folded in her lap. Near the windows, someone murmured agreement. A woman I didn't recognize said softly, "Oh, that's so generous of her to ask," as if I'd already said yes. I stood up. "No," I said. Not loud, not sharp, just the word, clear, in the middle of the room. My sister's smile shifted. "We're just asking." "I know what you're asking," I said. "The answer is no. I bought that house. I paid for it alone, over 5 years. I make the decisions about it. That doesn't change because you ask it in front of people." The room went very still. I could hear the kitchen exhaust fan. Then my father's chair pushed back. He walked toward me with the particular set of his face I'd been watching my whole life. The look that means he has decided I need correcting, and that the room agrees with him. He stopped close. I could smell his aftershave. I've always hated that aftershave. "You're embarrassing this family," he said low. "I think that's being done without my help," I said. His hand shot out and closed around my forearm. Not a slap, something slower and colder than a slap. His fingers dug in just below the elbow, thumb pressing into the inside of my arm. And he pulled me slightly toward him, the specific motion of someone demonstrating that they can still move you. That even here, even in front of everyone, they still have that particular power. I've been watching him use it my whole life. I'd just never had 47 witnesses before. Then I heard the clapping start. My sister. Single, deliberate claps, with the rhythm of a point being made rather than applause being given. A pause between each one. Then a few others joined. Confused, reflexive, social. The way people clap when they're not sure if the moment has passed, and they want to be on the right side of it. I looked down at my father's hand on my arm. I looked at my sister. I said, "Let go." He held on for one more second, then he released me. I picked up my bag, lifted my coat from the back of my chair, and walked through the room without hurrying. Past the gift table, past the photograph wall, through the front doors and out into the parking lot. The air was cold. I sat in the front seat of my car with the engine off. My arm hurt in a focused, specific way, the kind that makes you very aware of exactly where your body is in space. I took out my phone. I called the police non-emergency line first. I reported an incident. A man had grabbed my arm without consent at a private event, approximately 47 witnesses present, and I had photographic documentation of the resulting injury. The officer took my information and told me a unit would come to take my statement. I gave the address and said I'd wait in the lot. Then I called Adeline. We'd been friends since our sophomore year of college, before she went to law school, and I went into physical therapy. The kind of friendship that runs underneath everyday life and surfaces exactly when it needs to. She picked up on the second ring. "What happened?" she said. Not a question. I told her. The speech, the ask, my father's grip, my sister's slow, deliberate clapping. By the time I finished, She was already working on something in the background. The house, she said. Deed is only in your name. Just me, always just me. Emergency contacts on your county property records? Anyone listed with any access to your filings? I paused. My father, I added him 4 years ago when I didn't know better. I heard her exhale slowly. Pull the deed history when you get home tonight. Emergency contact doesn't convey any legal authority, but sometimes people use it as a starting point to test what they can request, see what the office will give them. A pause, and photograph your arm right now before anything fades. I held the phone up and took the picture. Sent it to her immediately. 4 distinct fingerprint marks already visible. A thumb bruise forming on the inside of my forearm. That's coercion, she said. That photo matters. A police cruiser pulled into the lot while we were still talking. I told Adeline I'd call her back. The officer who took my statement was calm and didn't make me feel small about any of it. She photographed my arm herself. She explained I could press charges or simply file a report. Didn't steer me either way. I filed the report. She asked if I needed to go back inside for belongings. I said no. She asked if I was safe to drive. I said yes, and I meant it. I drove back to Salem in the dark. Heat on, radio off, both hands easy on the wheel. Something had clarified in my chest. The way things clarify when a decision you've been postponing for years finally gets made for you by someone else's hand. At home, my cat met me at the door with the reproach of a creature who counts hours. I fed her. I washed my face. Then I opened my laptop. My county property account showed no changes to the deed. But there was a logged external inquiry from 3 weeks prior. Someone had requested ownership verification on my parcel number. The requester's name wasn't listed, but the timestamp was a Tuesday afternoon, the same week my mother had called to remind me about the party. I took a screenshot and emailed it to Adeline. Then I opened the folder I'd been keeping for 4 years. I'd named it simply Records, and I'd maintained it the way you maintain something you hope you never need. Carefully, without drama. Every Venmo transfer to my family, bank statements showing wire payments, scanned receipts, text conversations screenshotted in real time when the asks came in. The 2 months of my parents' mortgage I'd covered when my father was between contracts. The furnace replacement for my sister's house, presented as a loan, never repaid, never mentioned again once her house was warm. The car note I'd co-signed in 2021, still in my name alone, on a vehicle I had never driven once. The wedding venue deposit, $1,400, quietly absorbed into the category of things daughters do for family, retroactively reclassified as a gift once the wedding was over, and asking for it back would have made me the difficult one. I hadn't kept these records because I planned to use them. I kept them because my gut told me to, and by 31, I'd learned to trust my gut about things my conscious mind was still making excuses for. I printed everything, labeled it by year, put it in a binder and photographed the binder and emailed it to Adeline with a single line. Here's the pattern. She wrote back at midnight. 6 words. This is more than enough. Talk tomorrow. In the morning, 3 things had happened while I slept. First, Adeline had found the record she was looking for. My brother-in-law had contacted the county assessor's office the previous month, identifying himself as my authorized representative and requesting information about the process for adding a co-owner to a residential deed. The assessor's office had flagged it unresolvable because he'd provided no documentation of authorization. No one had contacted me. Adeline had it through a records request she'd filed before 7 in the morning. Second, a video had appeared online. A woman who'd been a longtime colleague of my mother's had filmed the last 2 minutes on her phone. She'd been watching the room go wrong and apparently decided she wasn't willing to stay quiet about it. The clip showed my father's hand on my arm, my sister's clapping, caught from across the tent, a voice saying, "She had that coming." The caption read only, "This happened at a family dinner tonight. Is this normal to anyone else?" By 8 in the morning, it had been shared more than 1,000 times. Third, my sister had texted me, "You made this so much worse than it needed to be. I hope you're happy." I read that 3 times. I didn't reply. Adeline called at 9. She asked about my lakehouse's smart lock. I'd installed a keypad entry system 2 years ago, and mostly forgotten about the access logs. She'd pulled the history through my account. There were 3 access attempt sequences in the past 2 months. All failed. All on weekday afternoons when I was at work. Someone had tried my parents' old house alarm code first, then my birthday, then a string of zeros. 3 tries each time, then nothing. I sat with that for a while. The intimacy of someone trying your birthday. Okay, I said, tell me what to do. She did. A cease and desist to my sister and brother-in-law. A formal letter to the county assessor, flagging the unauthorized representation attempt, and requesting enhanced identity verification on any future requests tied to my parcel. A report to the State Financial Regulatory Office, because by mid-morning, a contact of Adeline's had confirmed what I'd half noticed in old statements and never looked at directly. There was a joint account application at a credit union I'd never used, filed 8 months ago, in both my name and my sister's. My signature, or something shaped to resemble it, was on the document. The account carried a $12,000 line of credit attached to it. I had not opened that account. I had not signed anything. I called the credit union myself, fraud department. I gave my information, confirmed the account existed, told them it was fraudulent, and began the complaint process. They froze it during the call. By mid-afternoon, reports were filed. The credit union, the county assessor's office, the state financial regulator. Adeline was formally retained. I sent my sister one email. Subject line documentation, no text. Only attachments. The fraudulent account application. The failed lock attempt logs with their timestamps. The county inquiry record. A copy of my police report from the night before. No reply. Her husband left a voicemail that was careful in the way voices get careful when someone has been coached by someone else to be careful. He said there had been a misunderstanding. He said they'd only been trying to help the family. He said he hoped we could work it out privately. I forwarded it to Adeline without comment. My mother called twice that evening. I answered the second time. "You're destroying us," she said. Not accusing. Genuinely bewildered. Like she'd woken up inside a story that wasn't supposed to unfold this way. "I'm protecting what I built," I said. "Which is all I've ever done." There was a long silence. "You've always made everything so hard," she said finally. I thought about the car note, the mortgage months, the wedding deposit, the furnace. None of it had felt hard to give. All of it done quietly, because it seemed like the right thing, and because I loved them, or believed I did, or believed that love meant absorbing as much as you could so the people you loved didn't have to. I understood now that that belief, unexamined long enough, can become a kind of permission slip you give people without meaning to. "I know that's how it seems to you," I said. And then I said goodbye and hung up. The video hit 200,000 views by evening. Comments came in patterns. Some angry. "It's just a house. Family should come first." Most not. Mostly people sharing their own versions of the same story. Daughters who had built things alone and found family waiting with moral claims. Women who had paid for things quietly for years and been described by those same families as cold and withholding when they finally said no. The comments didn't feel like winning. They felt like being recognized, which is quieter and harder to hold. My sister's home staging business partnership dissolved 3 days later, her co-owner citing the ongoing legal attention as incompatible with the brand. My brother-in-law's deed inquiry was referred to the county fraud division. The credit union filed its own referral with the state. A handwriting examiner Adeline retained confirmed the signature on the account application wasn't mine. Not even a close reproduction. Someone had copied it from the car loan document my father had kept a copy of, and traced it badly. Adeline sent me a message at the end of that week. "It's moving. You don't have to do anything else right now." I took a personal day and drove to the lakehouse. The gorge road was clear, the river running fast below the highway. I had my cat in her carrier on the passenger seat. She complained for the first stretch, and then settled into sleep, one paw draped over the edge of the door. I let myself in with my own key. I walked through every room slowly, the way you walk through a place you came close to losing. The kitchen where morning light comes in off the water. The back porch where the herons sometimes land at dusk. The small office with the window facing the ridge. I made coffee, and carried it out to the dock. The river doesn't negotiate. It doesn't stop to consider who holds the deed to the banks. It moves in one direction and carries what it carries and releases what it releases. I watched it for a long time. I thought about a colleague of mine, a physical therapist, quiet and competent, who'd been telling me for months about her stepbrother slowly draining an account tied to her mother's property. She kept second-guessing herself, kept wondering if she was reading it wrong, if she was being paranoid, if making it a problem would just make her the difficult one. I thought about another woman at my clinic whose name had been quietly removed from her grandmother's deed without her knowledge, discovered only when a tax notice arrived at an address she no longer had access to. I'd listened to both stories and said careful, supportive, ultimately insufficient things. I pulled out my phone and texted my colleague. I said, "I want to tell you what happened to me this week. And I want to introduce you to my attorney if you're open to it. No pressure at all. But I don't think you're reading it wrong." She replied in under 5 minutes. I've been waiting for someone to say exactly that. I stayed on the dock until the light changed and the air turned cold enough to matter. My cat appeared from somewhere inside and pressed herself against my leg, the way she does when she's decided I've been alone long enough. I let her. The river kept moving. The deed came back confirmed and clear 6 weeks later. Adeline's message arrived at 7 in the morning. Done. Yours. No conditions, no encumbrances, nothing open. I didn't post anything. I didn't write a statement. I let the legal process do what legal processes do, in the offices where they do it, and I stayed quiet everywhere it didn't count. Quiet in the specific way that has nothing to do with being silenced, and everything to do with knowing where your voice actually lands. I still feel my father's grip sometimes. Not painfully. The way you feel something that left an accurate impression, a piece of information the body decided to keep. A reminder of where I was standing in that parking lot, how cold the air was, how clear everything got when I stopped waiting for the room to do something and made the call instead. I didn't need to shout. I just needed to know who to call and what to say when they answered. And I did, and that was enough.